My name is Blake Shook, and I started keeping bees as a kid and really fell in love with it in a bit of an obsessive way, and dove into all aspects of beekeeping. And so for many years, I was just a commercial beekeeper, a migratory commercial beekeeper. And then I guess in 2010 or 11, really wanted to diversify. I loved commercial beekeeping, but I didn't like the volatility of the honey market and never knowing what I was going to make that year because I had no idea what wholesale honey prices were going to be. I saw a lot of threats to the wholesale honey market, which we'll talk about, and wanted to diversify. And so really just began starting other businesses in the beekeeping industry. And so today, we have the Bee Supply, which is a chain of hobby beekeeping supply stores, Commercial Bee Supply, which sells commercial beekeeping supplies, Desert Creek Honey, which is a honey brand. We pack a lot of honey and sell it to stores like Walmart and H-E-B. Amazon's a big client. And then we have about 30,000 hives in our commercial beekeeping operation. We raise and sell a lot of bees, so we sell a lot of nooks. We're a decent sized supplier of bees, and then we have pollination business where we broker bees and pollinate in almonds in California. So about 6 different businesses in the commercial beekeeping industry that touch most segments of the industry.
That's awesome. So let's first talk about the producing side. What are the most challenging things that you guys face in that side of your company?
So producing honey is tough to keep bees alive.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, as we all know. One of the bigger challenges for us, it's not varroa mites. They're a big problem. They're a big issue with the overall health of honeybees. But we know how to keep varroa mite levels low, and we know if we do things at the right time on the right schedule, we're okay. And so I wouldn't actually say varroa is one of our biggest problems. I would say queens are a big problem in general. We have a little harder time controlling queen longevity. But I would say one of our biggest problems is just bee yards finding areas to produce honey. Areas where I used to produce 100-pound crops now are 40-pound crops. And so we're moving to new areas, and there's just not that many areas left to produce great honey in the U.S. So finding good bee yards is a huge problem. That's probably one of the biggest hindrances to growth. And then I would say macroeconomics. So the price of almond pollination and then the price of honey on the honey market. I mean, that dictates everything. If the price of pollination and honey production would go up 30%, then we'd probably double the size of our operation.
Oh, yeah.
But when it's near break-even points, it's hard to grow. So
Absolutely.
I would say those are some of the biggest challenges.
For sure. And what about on the packing side?
On the packing side, there are a lot of challenges. And I'm so glad you asked, because I think that, coming from a commercial beekeeping background, getting into packing and selling to major retailers, I didn't know the challenges that packers face. I thought, well, they're just rolling in all the money and and they're taking advantage of beekeepers. And to be fair, some are, and some are certainly dishonest, and that's a huge issue that we need to address as an industry. What I didn't realize is how low margin the food business is. I mean, it's selling a food, and the food industry has notoriously low margins.
Yep.
And so, on a great commercial beekeeping operation where you have a good year and everything's good, I mean, you can make a 30% margin some years or more. And packing and selling honey, no way. I mean, a 10% margin is, I would say, average, and that's a tight margin. So I would say just the nature of how tight the margins are in the food industry is a unique challenge. So your processing, your production has to be crazy efficient. Pennies matter. If you can get a 3-cent reduction on the cost of your jars, that's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
So margins are tight. I would say as a packer that sells domestic honey, not imported honey, a huge issue is trying to compete with other packers that are selling an imported honey. And so our honey might be on the shelf and it's $3 higher than the next guy, and we're trying to sell to a similar customer. So just being competitive selling domestic honey is really, really tough. Getting into stores is tough because buyers are looking for cheap products with economic challenges, and they're wanting a cheap product in general, and that's tough to do with a domestic product. Most people don't realize it takes years to get into a grocery store, so you can't just go to Walmart and say, "Hey, take my honey." I mean, we tried for like 4 years before finally getting in, and that's a bit of a miracle to get in. And so it takes years. The food industry moves incredibly slow. It takes years to get into stores, and then staying on shelf is extremely difficult too.
Absolutely.
So there's just like there's unlimited challenges in keeping bees alive, there are tremendous challenges in packing and selling honey too, especially if you're going to do domestic honey.
Yeah, so did you guys start the packing side to get a higher price for the honey that you guys were producing? Is that what?
Yes. Yeah, so we were tired of the market volatility and for just selling honey by the barrel. And so, we wanted to take control of that and sell it. And what we found is that when the honey market was high, so when the honey, when you're getting $250 to $280 a pound in the barrel, we were making more money not packing and selling honey.
Yeah.
But when honey is $1.80 a pound, we're thankful we're packing and selling honey.
Absolutely.
But it also evens out cash flow a bit because you're getting a steady cash flow year round. But yes, we did start it to try to avoid that market volatility.
Absolutely. So I know that there's a lot of regulations on your packing side, not so much of your buying side of when you buy honey from someone, your packing side. And I don't think a lot of commercial guys understand that.
Yes.
Could you explain that for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I always tell people I thought that I had commercial beekeeping down fairly well. It's like, okay, I can be successful at commercial beekeeping. I know how to run a business, so I should be able to pack and sell honey.
Yep.
And it was such a different business. I had no idea what I was getting into because it's a food manufacturing business, and there's no correlation in commercial beekeeping and food manufacturing, other than that we extract honey. But again, it's a wildly different business. And so on a small scale, if you're just packing, 10,000, 20,000 pounds of honey, the regulations aren't too bad. You need a state food manufacturer's license in general, and that's enough. But once you start packing hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds, you have to be SQF certified, which is just FDA certified. You're certified with your state. To get SQF, there's different levels of SQF certification. We're finally got to one of the top tiers of SQF certification. And I'm trying to remember how many pages of documentation it took. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation just to get that SQF certification. It's tens of thousands, if not a couple $100,000 to get that certification. We have a full-time quality control guy that just administers that SQF certification program. It's insanely expensive and rigorous to get that certification.
Absolutely.
So it's a lot. It's cheap. It's very expensive. It's not cheap, and that's on a business that's already very low margin. So you're under incredible pressure to do very high volume because you've got to do high volume to make it worth doing.
So when you guys are buying honey from other beekeepers and say, I wanted to sell you guys some barrels of honey, are you guys testing? How does that process go down?
Yeah.
Just explain that.
So we always test. We always test the honey when we buy it, and it varies. What we like to do is we take a sample from every tote. If it's a semi-load of totes, that's only 13 or 14 totes. So we take a sample from every tote, and then we mix the sample together and then test that.
Okay.
And then if there's an issue, then we can dive a little deeper into the load and see is it the whole load or just pieces of it. If it's barrels, we just take a sample from a percentage of barrels, put it all together, and then do testing. You never know what you're going to find.
Have you guys found a lot of?
Oh, absolutely. You always have to reject loads occasionally.
What percent would you guys say?
We reject a very small percentage. We've had it happen. I would say it's a couple percent. It's very low.
Okay.
Most of the beekeepers we work with are close friends.
Yeah,
we know their operations. We know that they're reputable. But we certainly had to reject loads before.
Yeah, for sure. So as you look at this whole problem with American honey, what would you say are some of your? I know there's a lot of issues. We were talking about that earlier. Yeah. But what are some of your main issues?
My main issue is that I don't know. I'm concerned about the long-term dynamics of what we're seeing. We're seeing the demand for honey continued to slowly increase. I mean, we saw it double in a 20-year span, which is
Absolutely.
ridiculous. We're not seeing that same rate of growth, but honey's still wildly popular and continues to grow in popularity. We're not able to produce nearly the honey consumed. I mean, we're consuming 600 million pounds, we're producing 120 million pounds. So as consumption increases, in my opinion, we're producing about the maximum amount of honey we can produce as an industry. I mean, there's nowhere in the U.S. you can go that's a great honey producing region that that isn't already saturated with bees.
Oh, yeah.
Anywhere in the country. So I don't think we can produce much more than 120 million, 150 million range, maybe 180 on an incredible year. But we can't produce all the honey. So I don't think just banning imports is a good idea, because what you'll see is everyone switching to corn syrup. Part of the reason honey is so popular is because it's so widely used. And if we just ban all imports, then we're not going to see much honey usage anymore in ingredient honey. So what I'd love to see is that ingredient honey is imported honey, and we reserve the retail honey for domestic honey, where we can charge a little more of a premium.
Yeah, I was talking about it with the other guys, talking about the factor that honey is a very big health food. Everyone right now, it's a big thing. You want to have your sourdough, you want to know where your food comes from. We're going to have a homestead.
Yeah.
And so anything that has honey on it adds an added value to that, because it's a health product.
Right.
And so, that's a great idea to be able to put foreign honey in that, but then on the other end, have American honey. Because American honey, there's less of it. There should be a higher demand price-wise for that. Right.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that it's a multi-phased approach, because I think it's, we like to blame packers, but I think, and packers do bear some of the responsibility for us not having a higher domestic honey price. But to be fair, I think I know personally some packers that do overpay to support the U.S. beekeeper. But I think it's also educating buyers at grocery stores. It's educating buyers at food manufacturing companies on what they're getting. And we can try to educate the consumer, but we're probably more efficient with our dollars educating influencers. But I think there's a lot of confusion around what is domestic honey, what is imported honey. Most customers don't know. Many honey buyers don't know. The labels make it very confusing. So I think there's work we can do in clarifying labels so that it's pretty clear what the consumer's buying and what they're not buying.
So when you look at it from a packer standpoint, what are things that Americans, so obviously you're paying, obviously like you said, you're mostly your friends and people you know, and I would do the same thing.
Yeah.
So what can American beekeepers do from a packer standpoint to get a higher dollar for their honey? If they're coming up to you and say, hey, I have this honey I want to sell, what are some things that they can do as an industry, as honey producers, to be getting a higher dollar from you as a packer standpoint?
Yeah, that's a really good question. This may not be the direction you're looking for, but it is a good question, because there are things that many people may not think of that I would actually, as a packer, pay more for.
Yeah.
I would pay more if it's in totes than barrels.
Why is that?
Because I can handle one tote, or I can handle 5 individual barrels. Because a tote holds 5 barrels, so it's way more efficient. So, I'd pay more for honey in totes. I'd pay more, the cleaner the honey is, the more I'd pay for it. So if a beekeeper would install just a sock filter, not wanting it to be a sock strainer, I should say, I don't want it to be filtered, but if they would just do a coarse sock strainer in their extraction process so that it's pretty clean, that actually saves us a ton of time when we're trying to process honey. So if it was in totes, if it was clean, even just decently cleaned, if they would offer any terms, we pay a lot for terms, because our cash flow is always a problem too. And so if they would term it out over longer periods of time, if they would do any sampling proactively, testing proactively. So if we're probably still going to do some testing, but we wouldn't have to do it as much, and there wouldn't be as much of a delay, which speeds up our efficiency.
Yep.
And so if they would, cost a couple $100 to do a test. So if a beekeeper came to me and said, hey, Blake, I'll offer these terms. My honey's cleaned. It's in totes. Here's the test results. My goodness, you just made my life easy.
Yeah, and he would be a reputable source for them to get testing through? That you would...
The one everyone uses is Intertech in Germany. They're kind of the gold standard.
Yeah.
So Intertech in Germany, they're the gold standard for testing. So if someone did that, I mean, I would potentially pay, I might pay 20 to 25 cents more a pound. And that's a big deal. I mean, to take it from, $1.80 to $2.05, it's a big difference above market. But you're saving me a lot of money on my end as well. So some of those things are quite helpful.
Absolutely. Are you guys seeing a big flood of going to almonds in California because people are trying to make up their losses for their not decent honey crops?
Yeah, we are, but it's not. It's sort of working, sort of not, because now we have a surplus of bees on almonds.
Yep.
And so the last 3 years, if you go back 4, 5, 6 years ago, you had way too many almonds and not nearly enough bees, and so there was always a shortage. And now for the first time ever, we have an excess of bees, and so that's driving the almond price down, which is putting more pressure on honey prices. It's a lose-lose game. It's a tough supply and demand situation. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what would you say to some beekeepers that are looking at this kind of as like a dark tunnel, aren't seeing very much light out of it? What are some things they can do to get higher honey prices, and what would you...
I'm of the opinion the last 20 years have been the golden age for beekeeping in the U.S. Ever increasing pollination prices, increasing honey consumption, increased hobby beekeeping has all led to just, I think, the golden age. I mean, if you talk to beekeepers 40 years ago, you didn't want to be a beekeeper. It was tough. Honey prices were terrible. There wasn't almond pollination. I mean, they were like the bottom rung of the ladder in agriculture. In the last 20 years has been, incredible. You can actually make money at this. So I think we're coming out of the golden years, but I don't think that we're going back to where we were 40 years ago. I think it's more like the silver years, where it's not as easy just to jump in and make a bunch of money. You got to be a little more creative. You got to work a little harder. You got to be a little more stubborn. But there's still a great future and great potential. So I see it stabilizing or slightly declining over the coming years. But I don't really see a sudden huge drop in pollination prices or honey prices. I don't think we're suddenly going to go to $100 for pollination and $1 for honey. I think we're kind of on this slow downhill trend, but it's a very slow downhill trend, which means we have time to do something about it before it gets terrible. And that's, I think, what you're trying to do here, which I so appreciate, is let's do something while we still can before it gets bad. So I'm still pretty optimistic about the future of beekeeping. I think there's a great potential here. I do think there's a lot of consolidation happening. There's packing companies consolidating, bee supply companies consolidating, commercial companies consolidating, and that's to try to drive efficiency because the margins aren't as good as they once were. So I think you're seeing shifting dynamics in the industry for sure, but I still think it's an amazing industry that there's plenty of potential in.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for talking with me. I really appreciate it. I know you guys are busy.
No, thanks for all you're doing. I appreciate it.
Yep.